I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, December 3rd. Assembly of First Nations chiefs voted unanimously Tuesday to demand the federal and Alberta governments withdraw their new pipeline agreement, while voicing full support for First Nations on British Columbia's coast who strongly oppose the project.
Whether you support the pipeline or not, we can all agree that any government must seek our free and prior and informed consent before any proposed projects take place on our land and waters. This MOU provides no such assurances. The MOU enables the government to do business as usual, despite legal requirements to uphold the UN Declaration. This MOU sets us back decades, not just the recklessness language that undermines all First Nations rights, but we have all been down this road before. I take us back to former Enbridge pipeline, which sought to ram through our territories without our consent. Make no mistake, First Nations in BC stood in unity then, and we stand together now.
Hundreds of First Nations leaders are meeting in Ottawa this week for the AFN's annual December gathering, where the recently announced federal-provincial memorandum of understanding for a pipeline to Asian markets quickly rose to the top of the agenda. In response, AFN delegates passed an emergency resolution, reaffirming their support for the existing tanker moratorium and rejecting any move to weaken it.
On the weekend, we saw a national report on the Alberta-Canada MOU state categorically that the mantra of free, prior and informed consent from Indigenous communities is gone, as if First Nations rights can be wiped away with one federal-provincial MOU. It was difficult to watch BC and many First Nations excluded from these discussions, particularly on the Pacific Coast. So we lift up all chiefs impacted for their passion and for their leadership, regardless of their position. Chiefs, of course, have different views on development, and this is to be celebrated. I told the press that this morning, not feared or used against us as a wedge to try and divide us. The truth is that Canada can create all the MOUs, project offices, advisory groups that they want, but chiefs are united. When it comes to approving large national projects on First Nations lands, there will not be getting around rights holders. That's another reason outstanding First Nations treaty rights must be reconciled before others, because Métis rights do not include rights over First Nations lands, territories, and resources. First Nations, with the exception of the Inuit, are the only true landowners of these traditional territories. We have governed these lands. We have governed these lands since time immemorial, prior to colonial borders. Our rights cannot be implemented and respected without us in substance and in process, and they cannot be respected after the fact. When Canada and the provinces tried to exclude First Nations from repatriating the Constitution in the early 1980s, we fought to ensure Section 35 was included to affirm our treaty and pre-existing inherent rights. We raise this critical history because Canada, the province, and proponents developing these major projects must take First Nations rights seriously. Everyone should know by now that there is no cutting corners when it comes to protecting human health, vital watersheds, and the constitutional rights of First Nations people.
In addressing the Assembly of First Nations, Prime Minister Mark Carney stressed principles of construction, trust, and partnership with First Nations.
Canada's new government is committed to working directly with you to build stronger nation-to-nation relationships. For it's only by working together that we can build stronger, more prosperous First Nations communities and a stronger, more resilient Canada. In a more dangerous and divided world, Canada is choosing to build, from major national projects to local infrastructure, including in housing and water. And above all, we are choosing to build brighter futures for all our people across this great land. This mission of building is a positive endeavor. The question is not what we're against, but what we're for, what we want to build together. Because this approach must be informed by and can only move forward with First Nations. We build Canadian. We build sustainably. And crucially, we will build in partnership by upholding Indigenous rights and building in ways that First Nations communities have greater security and greater prosperity.
The Prime Minister also made news on another front, announcing that his government will table new clean drinking water legislation in the spring, a bill previously promised for the fall. He committed to reviving the legislation during his speech to the AFN gathering, saying that he will convene a joint meeting with federal, provincial, territorial, and First Nations leaders early in the new year, with water infrastructure solutions set to be a key priority. In his speech Tuesday, Carney said 85% of drinking water advisories on reserves had been lifted through investments of over $7 billion since 2016.
Making a generational investment overall of $13 billion in housing through Build Canada Homes. And this is on top of the funding, $5 billion since 2016, invested directly in on-reserve housing. We're also moving forward with the essential work of building infrastructure on reserve, beginning with recognizing, as we all do, that clean water is foundational. Over the last decade, 85% of drinking water advisories on reserve have been lifted through investments of over $7 billion since 2016. Our government is committed to ending the remaining 38 advisories, and we've allocated in this budget an additional $2.3 billion for that purpose. Now, we recognize that we need a more permanent solution through a coordinated approach supported by the right funding mechanism and working with the provinces and territories at the table. This is a top priority for our government. And I'm pleased, the National Chief and I have discussed this, I'm pleased to announce that I will host early in the new year a joint federal, provincial, territorial First Ministers meeting with First Nations. And you will set the agenda. I'm sure that coordination and solutions on water will be one of the main items. I also can confirm that under the leadership of the Minister of Indigenous Services, this government intends to introduce water legislation in the spring of 2026. We will complete the crucial work as well, led by the Minister of Indigenous Services, to reform child and family services.
Quebec Liberal leader Pablo Rodriguez has expelled his former parliamentary leader from his caucus, saying she lacked loyalty to him and to the party. On Tuesday, Rodriguez said Marwa Rizki has done a lot of damage to the party since she fired her chief of staff last month and kicked off an internal crisis. The expulsion is the latest development in a series that has threatened to derail the provincial Liberal Party over the last 2 weeks. Just a day into his new role as federal culture minister, Mark Miller is already facing criticism from several Quebec officials, including the premier of his own province. Miller said Tuesday that the French language is precarious across North America, stopping short of echoing the Quebec government's position that French is declining specifically within the province. On the way to question period at the National Assembly, Quebec Premier François Legault fired back, calling the Montreal MP a, quote, disgrace to all Quebecers. The Parliamentary Budget Office said in a new report that it expects overall federal housing spending to decline based on expiring funding agreements in the coming years. Liberal ministers argue Ottawa's new Build Canada Homes Agency is just getting started to improve the stock of affordable housing.
We've requested details with respect to what's being cut and what's the status of sunsetting programs. At this point, the government, we kind of agreed to disagree. The government's declined to share any immediate information with us based upon what's in the public domain at this point. So looking at the corporate plans from CMHC and the departmental plans from other government departments and the annex in the budget, which provides a qualitative assessment of the spending reductions for CMHC, it's evident that there are going to be substantial, if not addressed, the current public data indicates that we're on track for a substantial decrease in spending in this area, and federal spending in this area.
I respect their work. It's just what I'd like is to sometimes you need a bit of nuance. In a sense, what they're saying is in 28, 29, but, without getting technical, is obviously there's a number of decisions that will have to be taken from now to 28, 29. What we presented to Canadian is I would say, an historical investment.
No compromise was reached on the key issue of control over Ukrainian territory. A Russian official said following talks in Moscow between senior U.S. officials and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The conversation was extremely useful, constructive, and highly informative. And it lasted not 5 minutes, but 5 hours. This meant we had the opportunity to thoroughly discuss the prospects for further joint work to achieve a long-term, peaceful resolution to the Ukrainian crisis. Naturally, my American colleagues and I discussed the content of the projects and documents that the Americans had previously submitted to Moscow, and we reviewed.
U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner met with Putin on Tuesday as the United States seeks to broker an end to the deadliest war in Europe since World War II. Although Yushakov described the conversation as very useful and constructive, he stressed that a lot of work lies ahead both in Washington and in Moscow. That skepticism was echoed across Europe today as Ukraine and its European allies accused Putin of merely pretending to engage in peace efforts. UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper called on Putin to end the bluster and the bloodshed and be ready to come to the table in the pursuit of a just and lasting peace. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian foreign minister urged the Russian leader to stop wasting the world's time. Their remarks underscored the deep mistrust and the wide gap that continues to separate Russia from Ukraine and its European partners over how to bring an end to the war Moscow initiated nearly 4 years ago. And as European leaders express doubts about Moscow's intentions, Canada is stepping up its own support for Ukraine. Ottawa is pledging another $235 million in assistance, announced today by National Defence Minister David McGuinty and Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand.
Today, I am here to make 2 announcements. First, I am pleased to announce that Canada, alongside several allies, will purchase a package of military capabilities under the Pearl program. This is the NATO vehicle for military support for Ukraine. Canada's contribution to the purchase of this Pearl package will be $200 million, bringing Canada's total contribution to $890 million over the past 6 months. Second, I am announcing that Canada is committing $35 million in security support through the NATO Comprehensive Assistance Package Fund. This brings Canada's contribution to the cap to a total of $180 million.
McGuinty says Canada will work with NATO allies to purchase a package of critical military capabilities sourced from the United States, valued at around $500 million USD. U.S. President Donald Trump says the United States will begin carrying out military strikes on land in the near future, though he did not specify exact locations. Speaking to reporters, Trump suggested that these attacks might not be limited to Venezuela, raising the possibility that Colombia could also be targeted.
And we're going to start doing those strikes on land, too. You know, the land is much easier. It's much easier. And we know the routes they take. We know everything about them. We know where they live. We know where the bad ones live. And we're going to start that very soon, too.
You just mentioned potential land strikes. Can you elaborate anything on that?
Yeah, I'll elaborate. If they come in through a certain country or any country, or if we think they're building mills for whether it's fentanyl or cocaine. I hear Colombia, the country of Colombia, is making cocaine. They have cocaine manufacturing plants, okay? And then they sell us their cocaine. We appreciate that very much. But yeah, anybody that's doing that and selling it into our country is subject to attack.
So not necessarily just Venezuela?
No, not just Venezuela, no.
Trump did not provide any further details on the timing or scale of the strikes, but his comments signal a potential escalation in U.S. military operations in the region. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth defended a deadly follow-up strike on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean, describing the situation as a classic example of the fog of war. Speaking to reporters during a cabinet meeting, Hegseth said he was not present for the second strike, but emphasized that the admiral in charge made, quote, the right call.
As far as the attack is concerned, I still haven't gotten a lot of information because I rely on Pete. But to me, it was an attack. It wasn't one strike, two strikes, three strikes. Somebody asked me a question about the second strike. I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved in it. I knew they took out a boat. Pete didn't know about second attack having to do with two people. I guess Pete would have to speak to it. I can say this. I want those boats taken out. And if we have to, we'll attack on land also, just like we attack on sea.
I have empowered them to make that call. Now, the first couple of strikes, as you would, as any leader would want, you want to own that responsibility. So I said, I'm going to be the one to make the call after getting all the information and make sure it's the right strike. That was September 2nd. I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. A couple of hours later, I learned that that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do. And by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat. He sunk the boat, and eliminated the threat. And it was the right call. We have his back. And the American people are safer.
So you didn't see any survivors, to be clear, after that first strike?
I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire and smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war. This is what you in the press don't understand. You sit in your air-conditioned offices or up on Capitol Hill and you nitpick and you plant fake stories in the Washington Post about kill everybody, phrases on anonymous sources not based in anything, not based in any truth at all. And then you want to throw out really irresponsible terms about American heroes.
And Pope Leo on Tuesday urged the United States to pursue dialogue and even exert economic pressure on Venezuela's leaders to achieve its goal, rather than threats of military action.
Sobre Venezuela, a nivel de la conferencia episcopal, con el nuncio, estamos buscando maneras para calmar la situación, buscar sobre todo el bien del pueblo, porque tantas veces quien sufre en estas situaciones es el pueblo, no son las autoridades. Las voces que vienen de Estados Unidos cambian con cierta frecuencia a veces. Hay que ver. Por un lado, parece que ha habido una conversación por teléfono de los dos presidentes. Al otro lado, hay ese peligro, esa posibilidad de que haya alguna actividad, alguna operación, incluso invadiendo el territorio de Venezuela. Yo no sé más. Yo, de nuevo, creo que es, digamos, mejor buscar maneras de diálogo, quizás presión, incluso presión económica, pero buscando otra manera para cambiar, si es lo que decidan hacer en Estados Unidos.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that he does not want what he called, quote, garbage Somali immigrants in the country, arguing that people from the war-torn East African nation rely too heavily on the U.S. social safety net. His sweeping characterization of the Somali community marks the latest in a series of pointed attacks he has made against Somali immigrants and their descendants. In his remarks, the president made no distinction between citizens and non-citizens.
But when I watch what is happening in Minnesota, the land of 1,000 lakes, or however many lakes they have, they got a lot of lakes, but this beautiful place, and I see these people ripping it off. And now I'm understanding, and you're going to look at that, Scott, I hear they ripped off Somalians, ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain and do nothing but we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly said that she's working closely with representatives of the United Steelworkers and Algoma Steel to ensure a brighter future for the 1,000 workers laid off by the company on Monday.
So obviously I want to talk about what's going on at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie. My thoughts are definitely with the workers, their families. I know this is a tough time, and I know this is a tough time particularly just before Christmas. And so I've been in contact with the company's leadership. I've been in contact with the CEO, the CFO, and also with Marty Warren, who's in charge of the steelworkers. We know that the entire steel sector in Canada has been mostly organized over supporting the U.S. automakers. And their business model before the tariffs was actually organized around that market. And because of the unjustified and unjustifiable American tariffs, which are at 50%, our steel sector is not able to send steel on the other side of the board to these U.S. automakers. And so in that sense, we've been working with the company to make sure that they were adapting their business model. And that is why we've provided this fall $400 million to the company, and Ontario also provided $100 million. And the goal was to make sure that the company would get through these months while they were working on pivoting and adapting their entire operations. We've been working with them also on a new beam steel plant and also a new plate steel plant in order to support the housing sector and also the defense sector. And we think that through these investments, there can be more jobs that come back to Algoma.
Bill C-9, the federal government's hate speech law, appears to be one step closer to removing religious exemptions. Our contributor, David Clement, has more.
In a significant development in Canadian politics, the Liberal government has struck a deal with the Bloc Québécois to remove religious exemptions from Canada's hate speech laws. Now, the move comes as part of an agreement to advance Bill C-9, a key piece of legislation aimed at combating hate and terror symbols. Bill C-9, introduced earlier this fall by Justice Minister Sean Fraser, fulfills a campaign promise made by Prime Minister Mark Carney during the spring election. The bill proposes several changes to the criminal code, including a new offense for intimidating individuals to block access to places of worship or centers used by identifiable groups. It also seeks to criminalize the promotion of hate through the display of symbols tied to terrorist organizations like swastikas. The catalyst for this agreement is a surge in police-reported hate incidents, particularly amid ongoing anti-Israel protests over the past 2 years. Under current law, Section 319 of the Criminal Code provides an exemption for hateful or anti-Semitic speech if it's expressed in good faith based on a belief of a religious text. Now, the Bloc Québécois has long pushed to eliminate this defense, even tabling their own bill, C-367, back in November 2023, though that stalled at first reading. Now, a senior government source, speaking anonymously, confirmed the partnership, saying, quote, "We do have bloc partnership. The bill is in place now, even with those bloc amendments, and that everyone is happy." In exchange for bloc support, the Liberals have also agreed to retain the requirement for a provincial attorney general sign-off on hate propaganda prosecutions, a safeguard the bloc insisted on keeping. Justice Minister Fraser, during an October committee appearance, expressed openness to the change, saying he saw, quote, "no problem with it if a majority of members agreed." However, the amendments were delayed due to a Conservative filibuster at the Commons Justice Committee. Once passed there, the bill is expected to move through the House of Commons before the holiday break on December 12th. Now, this shift has sparked plenty of debate. Jewish and LGBTQ+ groups, along with the Quebec government, have advocated for removing the exemption for years, arguing that it allows anti-Semitic and homophobic comments to proliferate under the guise of faith. For instance, the bloc cited inflammatory remarks made by a Montreal imam calling for the extermination of, quote, Zionist aggressors following the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. But on the other side, Christian organizations and civil liberties advocates defend the exemption as a protection for free speech. The Christian Legal Fellowship has warned that its removal could undermine the constitutional integrity of hate speech laws and risk imprisoning people for sincerely held beliefs. Richard Moon, a law professor at the University of Windsor, offered a nuanced view. He suggests that the change may have a limited impact as courts typically apply hate speech laws only to extreme cases. For example, calling homosexuality sinful based on religious beliefs likely wouldn't qualify as hate speech, but advocating for death penalties would. Moon emphasized, quote, "It's really important, if this exemption is removed, that it be made clear that almost all of what religious folks might have to say would absolutely not be caught by this provision." Now, Conservatives have slammed the bill as unnecessary censorship, claiming existing laws are already good enough. A spokeswoman for the Justice Minister countered that, saying every Conservative delay means those protections are delayed, amid rising hate. As this unfolds, it highlights a delicate balance between combating hate and preserving freedoms in Canada's minority government landscape. Back to you.
Culture Minister Mark Miller expressed support Tuesday for removing a religious exemption on hate speech from the criminal code.
Well, I had the question myself. Look, I'm a person of faith. I'm Christian. I have very, very deep beliefs. The reality is I don't think people should be using the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah to escape from committing a hate crime or claim that what would otherwise be a hate crime is done in the name of a religious text. You can look at the religious texts yourself and see what they mean, but the reality is that there is an exception in the criminal code that are making people hesitate. And when the conservatives come out and pretend that they are defending freedom of expression, they are defending people like Adel Shakari.
The Bloc Québécois said in a press release on Monday that the party had the government's support for an amendment to get rid of the exemption. And the Alberta government is urging prosecutors to think twice before laying charges in cases of self-defense. Justice Minister Mickey Amery says the prosecution of people for offenses made in self-defense wouldn't be in the public interest.
In September, the federal government announced a pilot project for their firearm confiscation scheme. Our government made it clear that we would not enforce this gun grab, because simply put, this is not about public safety. It will not stop violent criminals, and it will not stop illegal guns from being smuggled across our borders. We will oppose any policy that undermines law-abiding firearm owners and does not combat the criminal use of firearms. That's why today, I'll be introducing a motion under the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act to defend lawful firearm owners and ensure Albertans know that they have the right to use reasonable force to defend themselves, their families, and their homes from intruders if they ever need to. If passed by the legislature, the motion will instruct every single provincial entity, including law enforcement agencies such as municipal police forces, to decline to enforce or implement the federal gun seizure program. The motion also makes clear that Albertans have the right to use reasonable force to defend themselves, their families, and their homes from intruders. Under this motion, the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services will advise law enforcement that Alberta's focus is addressing violent crime. As Alberta's Attorney General, I will regularly review directives to the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service that provides guidelines to prosecutors not to prosecute home defense offenses when it is not in the public interest. We will not hesitate to use every single legal tool available to protect Albertans from misguided and expensive federal policies, and to respect every single Albertan's ability to protect themselves and their families within their own homes.
Amher's motion argues that the program is unconstitutional and that the buyback program only punishes law-abiding gun owners while doing nothing to stop violent criminals.
We know that nearly all violent gun crime in Canada is not committed by legal firearm owners, but by those who obtain weapons illegally through our nation's porous borders. Turning previously legal firearms into prohibited ones does nothing to make our streets safer. It simply punishes those who have acted in good faith and who have proven that they know how to follow provincial and federal law. Our position is grounded in law and in principle.
According to Food Banks Canada, food banks had a record amount of visits in March with nearly 2.2 million visitors. That's double the number from 2019. While this is the time of year that many of us think of giving, the holiday season seems to bring out the best in Canadians. The Calgary Food Bank is hoping this trend continues since stocks are low on shelves and there are so many in need right now. Our Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts spoke with the president and CEO of the Calgary Food Bank, Melissa Frum, to discuss what some of their biggest needs are.
Now, Melissa, you apparently have a donation wish list, and let's start with the needs of little ones like babies.
Yeah, definitely. One of the fastest growing needs for us here at the Calgary Food Bank is support for our littlest Calgarians, and that is baby formula and diapers. And I think it's worth noting when we are looking at families and households facing food insecurity and addressing issues around food inflation, baby formula is one of those food items that has seen the highest rate of inflation in our country in the last few years, doubling in price since 2017.
Well, now, what are some of the other big needs right now at the Calgary Food Bank outside of monetary donations?
You know, when we're looking at those food drives that are happening right now through the holiday season, some of those most needed items for us are pasta, tomato sauce, canned tomatoes, peanut butter, baby formula, and diapers.
Wow. Now, you also accept personal hygiene items such as soap and shampoo. What about pet food for our dogs and cats who are also members of our family?
You bet. We love when folks give us some of those personal hygiene items, whether it's feminine hygiene or items for folks starting out their first home, perhaps just coming out of homelessness in Calgary. We provide something called a welcome home hamper where we take cleaning supplies and allow those people to have, a nice greeting, a nice housewarming gift when they move into their first apartment. And then, of course, always looking for pet food and supplies for pets so that folks can keep those companions in their family.
Now, what are a few items that you simply cannot afford to accept, and can you explain why?
Oh, we are pretty loosey-goosey on the best before dates. We stick within the advice of Food Canada, where if it's within 2 years of best before, we'll take it. But there are some items that have hard expiry dates. And if it is something that is an expiry date, not a best before date, such as baby formula, we cannot accept that and distribute it. We really try to stay away from accepting non-food items. Sometimes folks will drop off used clothing and bicycles and things like that. And unfortunately, that just places a burden on us and our team and our systems to get that to a charity that can better make use of those items. So we really ask for folks not to use us for that purpose.
What about in the summertime, some of the homegrown fruit and veggies?
You know what? We will take that as long as it's in good condition and we clean it up and we get it out the door. We don't do crab apples because I'll tell you, everyone's looking for someone to take their crab apples in the summer. But we still take zucchini.
Now, during your intake period with clients, do they often talk about the economic pressures they're currently facing right now?
Yeah, we hear a lot from folks about the challenges that they're facing. And I would say, gone are the days where there was perhaps a stereotypical or a caricature of who a normal food bank client is. We are seeing everything from senior citizens who saved for their retirements, did everything right, had the plan in place, and simply did not count on this level of inflation happening with what we've seen over the last few years. We have a quickly growing demographic of working poor. These are folks who, for all intents and purposes, are doing everything right. They have a full-time job. They're paying the mortgage. They're making their car payments. They're paying their insurance. They're paying to heat their homes. And at the end of the month, there's simply not enough left to pay for those groceries to put food on the table for the family. 30% of the clients represented at the Calgary Food Bank are minors. They're children whose parents are struggling to make ends meet. So, there's really no one story anymore. There's really a lot of different stories, but it all comes down to excessive cost of living.
Melissa, during the holiday season, people always like to give back to their community. Sure that they have big hearts, but you're looking for a commitment and donations, year-round?
Unfortunately, hunger and food insecurity is not seasonal. And while we appreciate the fact that this is a time of year when many Canadians feel particularly generous and they give of their time and their talent and their treasure through the month of December, we are feeding 800 households a day, every day, all year long. And so, there used to be a time when December was actually a busy month for client intake. And we're at the point now where we are at maximum capacity every day of the year. So there's not even room in our system to accommodate a busy season with our clients. And so we just implore on all Calgarians to support us all year round too. And don't forget about us come January 1st.
Melissa Front, President and CEO of the Calgary Food Bank, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Hal.
If you're in northern Manitoba, bundle up before heading outside. Environment Canada says a period of dangerously cold wind chills is sweeping the region. Forecasters warn that areas near the Manitoba-Nunavut boundary could see wind chill values drop to -45 or lower. Conditions are expected to gradually improve later this week, but residents are urged to dress warmly and limit time outdoors. While northern Manitoba braces for extreme cold, Environment Canada is also warning Atlantic Canadians to prepare for a mix of snow, rain, and strong winds over the coming days. Meteorologists say that the system will bring rapidly changing conditions, with some areas seeing heavy snow while others experience freezing rain and periods of rainfall. Coastal regions could also see high winds and rough seas, raising concerns for small craft and travel safety.
This low-pressure system is going to affect mostly Nova Scotia and Newfoundland the worst, but there are some impacts expected for parts of New Brunswick and PEI as well. Nova Scotia, we're looking at some significant snowfall over western parts of the province, running from Annapolis County right up through to Cumberland County and then across to Antigonish County and into western Cape Breton as well, with 15 to 25 centimeters possible for some of those areas. We have some significant rain on the way as well for most of the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia. We do have a couple of rainfall warnings in effect in the south. So with amounts of near 50 millimeters in Shelburne and Yarmouth counties, and the remainder of the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia could see anywhere from 30 to 40 millimeters. For PEI and southeastern New Brunswick, looking at about 10 to 15 centimeters total there. All three of these provinces, there's going to be some rain mixed in as well with the snow. So it's a very tricky forecast, and it's going to be some very wet and heavy snow as well. So amounts could fluctuate based on proximity to the coast, as well as anyone that's over some higher terrain, a little bit cooler air over higher mountains, Coppercoot Pass area, Cape Breton Highlands, those sorts of areas. And so they could see a little bit more snow, actually. And this system's going to pass out Nova Scotia, but then push up towards Newfoundland overnight. And they're expected to get some weather from this as well. Lots of the eastern half of the island are under warning as well. We're looking at significant snowfall amounts for parts of the East Coast, with maximum amounts of 30 to 40 centimeters possible for some areas around the Clarenville, Terra Nova area. Avalon Peninsula and parts of central Newfoundland will see lesser amounts than that, but still anywhere from 10 to possibly 20 or 25 centimeters there. Some parts of southern Newfoundland are expected to get significant rain from this as well, right along the coast, as well as some gusty wind conditions as well. Many parts of eastern Newfoundland will see gusts to 70 or 80, with some areas seeing values reaching 100 kilometers per hour with this. And again, their snow is also expected to be that very wet and dense, heavy snow mixed with rain along parts of the coast. So a good mixture of weather coming for a lot of Atlantic Canada with this system.
Staff at a Virginia liquor store got an unexpected surprise on Saturday when they arrived to find the store had been broken into, not by a person, but by a very intoxicated raccoon. The so-called masked bandit was discovered passed out in the bathroom, wedged between the toilet and a trash bin. Animal Control Officer Samantha Martin took the inebriated raccoon to Hanover County Animal Protection and Shelter for questioning, giving it time to sober up. After a few hours of rest and showing no signs of injury, aside from what looked like a minor hangover, the raccoon was safely released back into the wild. A player's first NHL goal is always a memorable one, but for the Nashville Predators rookie Ozzy Weisblatt, the accomplishment was extra special. The 23-year-old fired his first NHL goal home against the Calgary Flames, his hometown team, and afterwards pointed to the sky during his celebration in tribute to his brother, who passed away this year.
The frustrating point for Dryden Hunt is he did everything perfectly, and that puck had eyes and got right through his wickets.
Now Bunting driving, slides it over, they score! It's Ozzy, his first in the NHL. Ozzy Weisblatt. And it's fitting he went down on the ice as he poked it home. 4-0 Nashville.
What a great moment.
I'm just thinking it's about time. I feel like I've been all over it lately, and I've had so many chances this year to, score. I've been robbed a ton, so it's just relief for me. And obviously, I've thought about pointing to the sky for my brother for a while now, and just a cool feeling, and obviously that one's for him. So just huge relief for me.
Weisblatt, who was selected 31st overall by the San Jose Sharks at the 2020 NHL Draft, lost his brother Orca to a car accident. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca. Good night, Canada.